Imagine a forest at the very edge of the world, where the winter air is so cold it feels like a physical weight against the skin. In this place, there is a silence that feels alive, a thick, heavy stillness that precedes a storm. We stand before a single, thick stalk of bamboo, its green skin almost hidden beneath a mountain of heavy, wet snow. Nearby, the great oaks and the rigid pines stand tall, their branches stiff and defiant against the elements. They groan under the weight. They crack and splinter with the sound of a gunshot, echoing through the valley. They fight the snow, and in their fighting, they break. But the bamboo? It says nothing. It does not cry out against the cold. It does not resist the burden that the sky has seen fit to place upon its shoulders. Instead, it begins to lean. It bows deeply, lower and lower, until its crown touches the very earth. And then, in a sudden, graceful motion, whoosh, the snow slides off. The burden is gone. The bamboo snaps back to its original position, upright, unharmed, and unshaken, while the forest remains silent once more. This is the secret of the ages, a mystery hidden in plain sight. We have been taught that power is found in the noise of our resistance, that to be respected, we must be like the oak, rigid, loud, and unyielding. But the oak lies shattered on the forest floor, while the bamboo continues to grow toward the heavens. True power is not found in the roar. It is found in the strength of yielding. Silence is not a lack of energy. It is the ultimate expression of it. It is the fertile ground from which all genuine authority grows. Before we walk deeper into this forest together, I ask that you take a moment to settle your heart. If these words find a home in your spirit, perhaps you could leave a mark of your presence, a like, a subscription to our shared journey. I often find myself wondering where in this vast, frenetic world you are listening from. Tell me your city, your corner of the earth, in the comments below. It brings me a quiet joy to know how far these whispers travel. And if you feel moved to nourish this sanctuary, there is a small heart with a coin below. A thanks gesture. It is a way to help keep our hearth burning in a world that rarely values the slow and the deep. Any small kindness helps us continue posting these reflections every day. There are some truths, however, that require more than a fleeting video. I have gathered the whispers of timing, the sacred art of knowing when to strike and when to remain still, into a guide I call Master the Right Moment. It is a collection written for those who wish to walk deeper into the stillness, distilled into pages meant for the soul. You will find the path to it in the first comment below, waiting for you whenever you are ready to listen to the clock of the universe. Now, let us turn our gaze away from the forest and look into the flickering blue light of the modern world. We live in what we might call the age of the loudest. Our culture has become a voragem of noise, where we are told that to exist is to be heard. We are pressured to build personal brands, to speak our truth at the top of our lungs, and to defend our territory in every digital comment section and every office hallway. We feel this desperate, gnawing need to be seen, to be validated, to be respected. And yet, have we noticed the irony? The more we speak, the less we are heard. The more we demand respect, the more it seems to dissipate like mist through our fingers. We return home exhausted, our throats dry and our spirits depleted, feeling more invisible than when the day began. We are competing in a game of noise that no one can win. But the Tao offers us a different path, a third way. It is the way of water, the way of the silent power that carves through stone not by force, but by persistence and presence. The authority of the void Consider, for a moment, the room in which you sit. We often think of a room as being defined by its walls, its polished floor, or the beautiful art hanging upon it. But what is it that makes the room useful? It is the emptiness. It is the void between the walls that allows us to walk, to breathe, and to dwell within it. This is the first great pillar of silence, the authority of the void. Our modern lives are like rooms cluttered with so much furniture that there is no longer any space to move. We fill every silence with a word, every gap in conversation with a nervous laugh or a useless opinion. And in doing so, we lose our utility. We become a solid block of wood rather than a sacred vessel. As the old master Lao Tzu reminds us in the 11th chapter of the Tao Te Ching, we shape clay into a pot, but it is the emptiness inside that holds whatever we want. We hammer wood for a house, but it is the inner space that makes it livable. In the same way, the authority you seek in your life is not found in what you project outward, but in the space you maintain within. When you are always talking, you are constantly leaking your energy. You are like a bucket with 100 small holes. No matter how much water you pour in, you can never stay full. People see this leakage. They sense your desperation to be understood, and subconsciously, they lose respect for you. Why? Because a vessel that cannot hold its own contents cannot be trusted to hold the weight of leadership or the depth of a secret. Think of a modern business meeting, or perhaps a tense dinner with acquaintances. There is usually one person who speaks the most, the one who interrupts, who clarifies every point, who is terrified of a 5-second silence. We often mistake this person for the leader, but they are usually the most anxious person in the room. Now, think of the person who stays quiet. They listen. They observe. When a question is asked, they do not rush to fill the air. They allow a void to exist for 3, 4, 5 seconds. This silence acts like a vacuum. It pulls the attention of everyone else toward them. When they finally do speak, their words have the weight of a mountain because they have been birthed from a fertile silence. They aren't just reacting. They are responding from the center of their being. To cultivate this, we must learn to be comfortable with the unspoken. We must stop being afraid of the gaps. If someone asks you a question today, try waiting just a moment longer than feels comfortable before you answer. In that small void, you are telling the world that you are the master of your own time, that you are not a puppet being pulled by the strings of social expectation. You are transforming yourself from a leaky bucket of opinions into a sacred vessel of wisdom. You are discovering that silence is not the absence of something, but the presence of everything. Wu Wei and the art of non-persuasion. There is a profound exhaustion that comes from trying to convince the world of our value. We spend our days in a state of constant persuasion, trying to convince our bosses we are hardworking, our partners that we are right, or our friends that we are successful. This is what the Taoists call forced action. It is like trying to push a river upstream. It takes immense effort, and it yields nothing but fatigue. This leads us to our second pillar, the concept of Wu Wei, or effortless action, applied to the art of respect. The law of the universe is subtle. That which is hunted flees. When you hunt for respect, it runs away from you. When you try to force someone to value you, you create a natural psychological resistance in them. It is as if you are pushing against their chest. Their natural instinct is to push back. This is why the most persuasive people are often the most distrusted. True respect is not something you do. It is something you are. It is an attraction, not a pursuit. The Tao does nothing, as the ancient texts say, and yet nothing is left undone. The sun does not try to make the grass grow. It simply shines, and the grass responds. Imagine a conflict in your daily life. Perhaps a disagreement with a family member who knows exactly how to press your buttons. Usually, the dance goes like this. They say something hurtful. You react with a long explanation or an angry defense. They counterattack, and the mud of the argument thickens until you both feel filthy and disrespected. This is the opposite of Wu Wei. Now, imagine the power of non-persuasion. They throw the bait, a sharp comment, a judgmental look, and you? You remain like a deep pool of water. You do not enter the mud. You remain silent, not out of weakness, but out of a refusal to be moved from your center. Your silence forces them to stand alone with their own words. Without your reaction to feed the fire, the conflict has no fuel. They are forced to face their own reflection in the stillness you have provided. In this state of non-action, you become incredibly magnetic. People are drawn to those who are unshakable. When you stop trying to prove you are right, you possess a quiet authority that rightness can never touch. You begin to master the unspoken boundary. You no longer need to say, "Respect me." Your very presence, your refusal to be hurried, your lack of a need to explain yourself, your calm in the face of chaos, dictates how you are treated. You are like the water that flows around the rock. The rock is hard and defiant, but over time, it is the water that shapes the rock into something smooth and humble. This is the art of winning without fighting, of being heard without shouting, and of commanding the room by simply being the most centered person within it. As we walk further into this quiet grove, we encounter a truth that is perhaps the most unsettling of all, yet the most liberating. It is the realization that our silence is not just a shield, but a mirror. Have you ever stood before a mountain lake at dawn, before the first breeze has had the chance to ripple the surface? The water doesn't do anything. It doesn't ask for your attention. It simply sits there in its own perfect impermanence. And because it is so still, it shows you everything. It shows you the pines, the clouds, and if you lean close enough, it shows you the lines upon your own face that you've been trying to ignore. This brings us to our third pillar, the mirror effect. In our frantic modern world, we are constantly projecting our insecurities onto others. We look for someone to blame for our stress, someone to carry the weight of our frustrations. Most people are more than happy to catch these projections. If someone shouts at us, we shout back. If someone judges us, we defend our honor. But when we choose silence, something miraculous and terrifying happens. We stop catching the balls that others throw at us. We become like the mirror described by the ancient sage Zhuangzi, who whispered to us across the centuries that the perfect man uses his mind like a mirror. It grasps nothing. It refuses nothing. It receives, but it does not keep. When you remain silent in the face of an attack, you are not being a doormat. Quite the opposite. You are providing a surface so still that the aggressor is forced to see their own reflection. Imagine a situation at work. A colleague, perhaps driven by their own hidden abyss of inadequacy, tries to belittle you in front of others. They use sharp words, hoping to draw you into a voragem of conflict. If you fight back, you justify their aggression. But if you look at them with a calm, silent gaze, a silence that is fertile with presence, the energy of their insult has nowhere to go. It hits your stillness and bounces back toward its source. Suddenly, it is not you who looks weak. It is they who look out of control. The room feels a shift in resonance. In that silence, everyone else sees the other person's immaturity, and more importantly, the aggressor sees it too. This is the power of becoming a revelation for others. We often fear that silence makes us look like we have no opinion, But in reality, it makes us the most observant person in the room. We see the hidden motives, the shaky hands, the desperate need for validation in those who talk too much. By not keeping the energy they throw at us, we remain anchored in our own peace. We learn that silence is the ultimate judge. It doesn't need to pass a sentence. It simply reveals the truth. When you stop reacting, you gain the sovereignty of the observer. You are no longer a participant in the chaos. You are the space in which the chaos dissipates. This sovereignty of the observer is not a gift given by others. It is a territory we must reclaim within ourselves. This brings us to the fourth pillar of our journey, the sovereignty of the inner kingdom. We often mistake respect for a trophy that we must win from the outside world, as if it were a title bestowed upon us by a king. But true respect is a secondary effect. It is the scent of a flower, not the flower itself. The flower is your own self-reverence, and silence is the high wall that protects the garden where that flower grows. In our tradition, we speak of qi, the vital life force that flows through every living thing. Every time we speak unnecessarily, every time we overshare our lives on a glowing screen, every time we seek the approval of strangers for our small victories, we are opening the gates of our inner kingdom and letting our qi leak out into the streets. We become depleted, and the world, in its cold intuition, does not respect the depleted. It respects the full. As Confucius once taught, the superior man is quiet and serene, waiting for the appointments of heaven, while the small man is always restless, looking for advantages. Consider the pressure we all feel today to live our lives in public. We feel we must post our meals, our workouts, our career promotions, and even our heartbreaks. We think we are building a brand, but we are actually dissolving our mystery. Mystery is a fecund soil. It is where curiosity and respect take root. When people know everything about you, they feel they own you. There is no longer any room for them to wonder, to admire, or to hold you in high regard. You have become a known quantity, a data point in the noise. The sovereignty of the inner kingdom is built through what I call the digital fast of the soul. It is the choice to keep the most precious parts of your life in the shadows. It is the realization that your joy does not need a like to be real, and your pain does not need a comment to be heard. When you stop leaking your energy, something begins to change in your physical presence. You move differently. Your voice, when you do use it, has a different frequency. You begin to anchor yourself in your own being. Think of that person we all know who seems to carry an invisible weight of authority. They don't have to tell you they are important. They don't have to list their achievements. They simply exist with a sense of self-sufficiency that feels like a fortress. This is the result of a long process of maturation in silence. They have learned to trust the appointments of heaven rather than the whims of the crowd. When you embrace this inner sovereignty, you are no longer a beggar at the table of social approval. You are the host of your own life. And when the world realizes it can no longer manipulate you through your need for attention, it has no choice but to offer you its respect. You have become unshakable, not because you are hard, but because you are complete. As we travel deeper into the heart of this silent forest, we encounter a paradox that many in our frenetic age have forgotten. We often believe that to influence others, we must be the ones holding the microphone, directing the flow of ideas, and shaping the narrative with our own breath. But there is a deeper, more subtle power that comes from a different kind of presence. This brings us to our fifth pillar: deep listening, the paradox of influence. We live in a world where everyone is waiting for their turn to speak, where conversations have become nothing more than two monologues occasionally interrupted by a breath. we are so terrified of being forgotten or misunderstood that we rush to fill the air. And in our rush, we miss the very soul of the person standing before us. In our tradition, we speak of hearing with the spirit. This is a level of listening that goes far beyond the mere vibration of eardrums. It is an act of total, unadulterated attention, a silence of the ego so profound that you become a hollow reed through which the other person's truth can finally flow. Most of us listen with our intellect, constantly categorizing, judging, and preparing our rebuttal while the other person is still speaking. This is not listening. It is a defensive maneuver. But when you choose to listen with your spirit, you are offering the other person something that is increasingly rare in our modern voyagem, the gift of being truly seen. Think of a friendship or a partnership that feels strained. Often, the root of the friction is not a lack of communication, but an excess of it. Noisy, defensive communication that leaves both parties feeling empty. The next time someone you care about comes to you with their burdens, I invite you to try a different way. Listen until they are completely empty. Do not offer advice. Do not share a similar story of your own. Do not try to fix their pain. Simply remain in a state of fertile silence. Watch their eyes, feel the resonance of their voice, and wait. Usually, when someone stops talking, there is a small gap of 3 or 4 seconds before they find the true thing they wanted to say. If you speak too soon, you kill that birth. But if you wait, they will descend into a deeper layer of themselves. When you master this, people will begin to view you with an immense, almost mystical respect. They will describe you as wise or deep, even if you haven't said a single word of advice. Why? Because you have provided the mirror in which they finally recognize themselves. You have become a magnetic listener who leads through understanding rather than command. By giving up the need to be the center of the conversation, you have paradoxically become the most influential presence within it. You have anchored the interaction in a space where truth can breathe. And for that, the world will always offer you its highest regard. This brings us to the final threshold of our journey, the place where silence stops being a tool we use and starts being the very ground upon which we walk. We must understand that the power we have discussed is not a hack or a tactic to be deployed when we want something from the world. If you treat silence as a trick, people will eventually sense the manipulation. True authority comes from a total transfiguration of the self. This is our 6th pillar, the return to the source, or silence as a way of being. In the eyes of the old masters, silence is the root of all movement. Just as the darkness of the soil is the source of the oak's strength, and the stillness of the night is the source of the day's energy, a silent life is the only life capable of sustained power. We often live in a state of constant dispersion, our energy scattered like leaves in a storm across 1,000 notifications, worries, and social obligations. We are like a river that has been spread too thin across a flat plain. We lose our depth and eventually dissipate into the sand. To regain our power, we must learn to narrow our banks. We must learn the art of maturation in the dark. Lao Tzu once whispered that silence is a source of great strength. He didn't mean that we should never speak, but that our speech should always be rooted in a deep, internal stillness. To cultivate this, we must build pockets of Tao into the very fabric of our days. Imagine waking up tomorrow and, instead of immediately reaching for your phone, that portal into the noise of 1 billion other souls, you choose to sit for 5 minutes in total silence. You do not meditate with an app. You do not plan your day. You simply exist. You anchor yourself in the simple rhythm of your breath. In those 5 minutes, you are reclaiming your soul from the virajam. You are setting your vibration to authority rather than reaction. When you make silence your lifestyle, you no longer have to try to make people respect you. It becomes an atmospheric quality of your existence. People can sense the difference between someone who is quiet because they are afraid, and someone who is silent because they are full. One is a void of lack. The other is a void of abundance. As you move through your work, your family life, and your digital spaces, you carry this silent source with you. You become less prone to the impermanence of trends and the fickleness of public opinion. You are like the deep ocean. The surface may be tossed by the winds of the modern world, but the depths remain cool, dark, and utterly unshakable. This is the ultimate goal, to integrate the power of silence so deeply into your identity that you become a lighthouse in a world of flickering candles. We return now to our snow-covered forest. The sun has begun to crest the horizon, turning the white drifts into a sea of shattered diamonds. The bamboo, having shed its burden, stands straight and true. It is a humble plant, yet it possesses a resilience that the great trees cannot match. It does not need to roar to prove it survived the night. The sun, too, rises in total silence, yet its arrival changes the very nature of the world. My friend, you do not need to scream to be seen. You do not need to exhaust your spirit trying to convince a noisy world of your worth. The age of the loudest is a passing storm, an impermanence that will eventually blow itself out. But the way of the water, the way of the silent mirror, and the way of the inner kingdom, these are eternal. Your silence is not a white flag of surrender. It is the armor of a king who knows his kingdom is secure. It is the fertile soil from which a life of genuine respect and profound peace is harvested. As you step back into the noise of your day, carry a piece of this forest with you. Remember that you are a sacred vessel, and that your emptiness is your greatest utility. You don't need to prove your worth to those who cannot see it. Simply be. Stand in your truth with the quiet dignity of the bamboo. When the weight of the world becomes too much, do not break. Just yield. Wait for the right moment, and snap back into your power. You are not alone on this path. We are all walking each other home through the silence. Go now, and let your presence speak the words that your tongue no longer needs to say. As we move into the final stages of our journey, we find ourselves at the threshold of the most transformative shift of all. We have discussed how to stand in our power and how to use silence as a mirror. But now we must learn how to use silence to bridge the gap between ourselves and others. This brings us to our fifth pillar, the paradox of influence. Deep listening and the spirit's ear. In our modern voragem, we are starving for attention, yet we are drowning in noise. Everyone you meet is carrying a heavy, invisible sack of unsaid words, of stories that have never found a home, and of fears that have never been acknowledged. We have been taught that to be a person of influence, we must be the one who speaks, the one who dominates the airwaves. But there is a secret known only to the masters of the soul. You gain the most power over a situation when you have the courage to say nothing at all. This is not the silence of apathy. It is the silence of deep listening. Imagine, if you will, a small tea house in the mountains, far from the reach of notifications and demands. Two friends sit across from each other. One is distressed, his mind a storm of anxiety about his career, his failures, and his uncertain future. He speaks and speaks, his words tumbling out like jagged stones. Most people, in their desire to be helpful, would interrupt. They would say, "I know how you feel," or "Here is what you should do." They think they are being kind, but they are actually reclaiming the spotlight. They are making the conversation about themselves. They are killing the silence that the other person needs to find their own truth. But the wise friend, the one who understands the Tao, simply sits. He does not nod or shake his head. He does not offer a platitude. He creates a hollow space. He listens with his spirit, not just his ears. He feels the resonance of the pain beneath the words. And when the first friend finally stops talking, the wise friend does not rush in. He waits. He allows the silence to stretch, long past the point where it feels comfortable. In that silence, the first friend is forced to descend deeper. He realizes that what he was complaining about was just the surface. Suddenly, in the stillness provided by his friend's silence, he says the real thing. I am afraid I am not enough. That is the moment of transfiguration. By remaining silent, the wise friend has allowed the other person to give birth to their own clarity. This is the paradox of influence. The less you try to steer the river, the more the river trusts your banks. In your daily life, whether you are dealing with a child who is acting out, a spouse who is cold, or a colleague who is defensive, try the sacred gap. When they stop talking, do not speak for 5 full seconds. Let the silence act as a womb. You will find that people begin to treat you with a level of respect that borders on reverence. They will say you are the most insightful person they know, even though you haven't given a single piece of advice. You have become a magnetic anchor in their chaotic world. You are not just a person anymore, you are a sanctuary. The return to the source. Silence as a way of being. We now reach the summit of our reflection, where silence ceases to be a tool we use and becomes the very essence of who we are. This is the return to the source. We have spent our lives being defined by our doing, our jobs, our titles, our opinions, and our reactions. But the Tao tells us that all doing comes from being, and all movement comes from stillness. If your life is a tree, silence is the darkness of the soil where the roots drink. If you neglect the soil, no matter how much you do with the branches, the tree will eventually wither. Consider the impermanence of the world's noise. Trends rise and fall like the tide. Opinions shift like the wind. The respect of the crowd is as fickle as a summer storm. If you anchor your identity in these things, you will be in a state of constant, frantic motion. You will be a reflection of a reflection. But the person who has returned to the source is like the deep ocean. Have you ever considered that no matter how violent the hurricane is on the surface, no matter how many ships are tossed and waves are broken, 300 feet below, the water is perfectly still? It is cool, dark, and silent. The surface does not dictate the nature of the depths. To live this way in the modern world is an act of quiet rebellion. It means waking up and reclaiming your first moments of the day from the digital voragem. It means sitting by a window, watching the light change, and realizing that you do not need to input data to be valid. You are practicing the art of maturation in the dark. Just as a seed must sit in the silent, cold earth for months before it has the strength to break the surface, your spirit needs periods of non-output to develop genuine authority. When you move through your day from this place of inner source, the world senses it. You are no longer reacting to the traffic, the emails, or the slights of others. You are responding from a place that is already full. People respect you because you are no longer hungry. Most people are walking hungers, hungry for likes, hungry for validation, hungry to be right. When they meet someone who is silent because they are satisfied, it is the most attractive thing in the universe. You become a source for others. You become the one they turn to when the world becomes too loud. You have integrated the power of silence into your very cells. You no longer have to make people respect you. Your existence is the command. We return one last time to our bamboo forest. The sun has fully risen now, and the snow has melted into the earth, nourishing the very roots of the plants that carried it. The forest is quiet, but it is a fertile, singing quiet. The bamboo stands tall, not because it was the strongest, but because it knew when to be still. My friend, you are that bamboo. Our age has made us feel that we must be noisy to be significant, that we must be rigid to be respected. But the weight of the world is too heavy for the rigid. The snow will always fall, and the winds will always blow. If you try to fight the noise with more noise, you will only shatter. But if you embrace the void, if you become the mirror, if you reclaim the sovereignty of your inner kingdom, you will find a strength that the world cannot understand. You do not need to scream to be seen. You do not need to prove your worth to those who are too deaf to hear the truth. Your silence is your sovereignty. It is the armor of a king who knows his kingdom is not of this world, but of the spirit. As you leave this sanctuary today, do not rush back into the frenetic pace of the crowd. Walk slowly. Speak only when the words are more beautiful than the silence they break. And remember, the sun changes the world every single morning, and it never has to say a word. You are a child of that same stillness. Go now in peace and let your presence be your power.